Much, D-Man. And for the sake of discussion here, I would like to officially classify the composition that we've just seen. Stick with me for a second, because Jat was highlighting it as a poke dive comp. I'm going to rename it as the OMG most annoying comp. And for multiple reasons. Yorick, you can't do a thing to him. You can't push him out of lane. You can't get through his sustain. He's going to revive somebody. Cassiopeia, poison, stun, CC slow. Vigar, Event Horizon, needly spears. And in case all of that isn't enough, you have to kill Yorick twice just to bring him back to life. But, as fun as the composition was, if you actually break it down on a theoretical level, we quite liked it at the desk here. Let's kick us off with Crepa.
Yeah, at first glance, you're like, oh my god, what they're doing. But if you look at it, all the points you've raised already, they have so much synergy between every single pick. They have heals for the Aatrox. Aatrox just dives in, knows he can go super hard, even if he revives, gets revived by Yorick again, as you said already. But what I really liked was the siege potential they had. They basically had the Veigar cage, allowing for guaranteed poke with Nidalee Spears, with Cassiopeia cage, and Cassiopeia follow-up rather. They had disengage with the cage being there. People could not charge through it, so they would have to flank them. If they would charge through it, they had to go through Cassiopeia as well. And yeah, imagine if Lemondogs actually had an AP, and then that would make Veigar's ulti even better than that. It's just, if they survive the early game, they can get really good sieges off.
Yeah, that's the thing about it, though, is that as much internal synergy as this composition had for how creative it was, it still operates fundamentally on being ahead. And if they ever had fallen behind, because it only goes one direction, and that's into sieges, right? If they were trying to defend with this, it wouldn't have been quite so easy, because you want to use that event horizon next to a tower to really zone them off. But I think what was most scary about this game for me was if you look at OMG, they played the same style of aggressive forward zone heavy laning with these new champions. And they still crushed through that laning phase and got that big advantage. And most impressive is that they played their dive style and they still knew their limits. They knew their limits on champions we don't see them playing. And that is absolutely terrifying to other teams.
Yeah, these are very, very experienced players, and I would expect it coming in that OMG still plays OMG style, right? The controlled dives, and at the very least, and we talked about this a little bit, the jungle Yorick not being an obscure pick for this team. So some mix of comfort, some mix of new stuff. But then yes, you talk about this comp having to work well ahead, but that's what OMG excels at. They, like 95% of the time, do get ahead early, and it's just a different way to close out the game.
And I really like random supports that Big Pomelo pulls out, like Annie and Veigar, because I feel like Zyra and Sona and Thresh, people know the limits of those champions really well, and it's easy to play around them. But like, if you're up against the Veigar and you're like 600 AP on, well, not this game, obviously, because they had double AD, but if you have a really strong AP carry late game, it's actually really strong. Like a 2.5-second AoE cage is pretty OP.
I was really interested to see what he would build on that, because looking at that, yeah, it might look at first glance a little bit of a troll pick, but it worked really well as a support, and he just did a standard support build, no AP needed. I think it would be really good against actual teams that run an AP carry, because Veigar's ulti is really so good against AP carries as well. I like what Event Horizon brings in teamfights. I just think you probably have to dodge the 2v2 matchups early, because in a 2v2 trade, I don't see how Veigar is gonna win out the trade unless you have a really favorable matchup in which your AD carry completely outranges or outtrades the other AD carry.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And to sort of continue the topic of what you can do about this composition, assuming this continues to make it in competitive play. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but it certainly had some legs here. And we were discussing the fact that you have, I think, two main recourses here against this composition, one of which being incredibly hard dive, something bigger than just Vi, maybe like Malphite Orianna, following up with support Annie, for example, things with heavy engage, or alternatively, heavy flanking, things like Twitch/Shen/Evelyn, right, and coming in behind the team, because the disengage is one-sided. Cassiopeia stuns one side of the fight, Veigar stuns one side of the fight, and then you have to start brawling.
I would actually love to see what Curse of the Sad Bullet Time would do against a composition like this.
Yeah.
That sounds like a mess. I'm visualizing that team fight, and
everywhere,
I think just
boom, boom,
everything
boom.
just on top of one another. It's definitely a scary idea. Let's take a look at how the Group A standings have been affected coming into the final two games. OMG still undefeated at 7-0. SKT1 sitting 6-1. Lemondogs 3-5. TSM 2-5. And Gaming